and welcome to the Fedora Files. I am Gregory Fedora. With me today is Aaron Straight of Soulcraft Allstars. So, first off, for those of you who don't know what it is, Aaron, what is Soulcraft Allstars?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's a huge honor. And second of all, Soulcraft Allstars is a storytelling agency. Basically, we're a group of people who like to use any form of communication technology to tell stories and to move audiences, mostly to move them to action, to do something. And we're really a values-based company. So most of what we do is about people on the planet and things that we care about. And so we use everything from a lot of film, a lot of design, building storytelling and interactive websites, to rebranding, to experiential scenarios. And this forces us to work with, or not forces us, but allows us to work with some incredible people all around the world. We've been lucky enough to work on 5 continents and almost all 50 states.
That is amazing. Like, our paths have crossed many times over the years on different things, but we've never actually worked together on anything. But well, no, we have, but we won't get into that. But the what got you? Because I've followed you and I've known you and just seen your career and going in these different directions. What led you to this? What was the spark that you were like, I want to do this, and now you are doing it, which is awesome. But what started it?
Well, that's a good question. And I think it depends on how far back you want to go. But, I think a big thing for me was, as a kid, I looked around and I didn't see any jobs I wanted to do. Like, everybody's job looked boring as hell, or just not that exciting, not that interesting. I didn't know what I could do. I didn't think of myself as particularly talented or capable, but I looked around and was like, I think there's more out there. I think there's more to do. And I grew up, in the 80s and 90s, and the speed of technology and the style of communication was really evolving rapidly. And so my first loves were really reading, writing, and music. And so I discovered other people's worlds and imaginations and far off places that I had never visited growing up in a rural community in Virginia. And I discovered them through music, and I discovered them through reading books, and then eventually realizing that I could write. And that led me to uh, I had no idea what I wanted to do, with my life as a career. So I studied English literature and creative writing, and I really am thankful that I did, because even though I could have studied media, I could have studied filmmaking, I could have studied more the technical aspects of what I currently do, learning to communicate and tell stories, and the basic architecture of how you communicate with people was an invaluable lesson. And more recently, I've learned, I think that it's become more clear to me why that was a good choice. I think in hindsight, there's not been a straight path for me from like where I started to where I am now. And I would encourage a lot of people to recognize you're getting started, that there isn't always a straight path, and not to stress out about that. That, if you work hard and you build good relationships and you keep your eye on what you're after, even if it's a little vague, that it can work out. But I think that a big thing for me was a recognition that storytelling storytelling has been a critical part of the human experience since the dawn of time. We've sat around campfires for, depending on who you ask, millions of years, and we've communicated with each other, and we've communicated ways to cooperate. That's a big distinction between our species and others, is that we are highly cooperative species, and a lot of it has to do with the stories that we tell each other and the stories that we believe. And I really believe that maybe I could be a part of telling stories that mattered and that helped us cooperate on a level that helped people on the planet, and that led to some exciting opportunities and new developments. And so I was fortunate enough, through a lot of crazy twists and turns. I was in the music industry for a while. I was in event production. I even played didgeridoo professionally for several years, which was a strange and wonderful journey. But through that, and then also, I managed African musicians touring all over the world. I wrote arts education programs. Um, I worked in the performing arts. I did all kinds of different things. Really, I just did whatever I could do that someone would pay me to use my creativity. And that was really a huge goal for me. It was like, I don't really know exactly what I want to do. I don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer or necessarily a school teacher, although those are great professions. For me, it was about, can I get paid to be creative? And then can I also live for a living? And to me, that meant having adventure and real relationships while making a living. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of the crazy journey that I've taken.
Yeah, and well, that's fascinating because there are people out there that they pigeonholed themselves at a very early stage that I have to do it this way. I think a lot of kids these days like I have to go to college right out of high school. I've got to do this. I've got to get this. I've got to get this degree at this time, or I'm never going to succeed. And they miss out on huge opportunities. And like you were saying, like you kind of bet on yourself and you knew, okay, I don't want to do these things. And these things would require going and getting this kind of degree or that. And it would like for me myself, I went and got a degree that I ended up not really using. And I went in a different direction and I was like, of things I more enjoyed, but I wasted some years of my life. And you knew you wanted to be creative. You wanted to creative writing. And a lot of people are like, oh, creative writing, are you crazy? That is not going to get you anywhere. You're going to work at Starbucks, you know. But you doubled down on yourself and you did this and you kept going and going. And now here you are years later and you're telling stories and that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And as you did this, what as you started to see it and you were having your adventures and telling these stories, was there a moment when you're like, holy crap, I'm actually doing what I've wanted to do, and this is what I was made to do? And what was that like to you when you realized I'm actually doing what I was here, put on this earth to do? Because I think you are doing what you were put on the earth to do, because I've seen your stuff and it's amazing. And it's like, I couldn't imagine you doing anything else.
Well, that's a huge compliment, especially coming from a storyteller and person who's worked in the medium for so long. And I really appreciate that. And, I don't know if this is what I was put on this earth to do. A lot of times I feel like what I was put on this earth to do is just to love other people. And that's really been a realization, I think, as I came through a lot of the ambition that I had, that recognition that really loving my neighbor, loving my friends, loving my family, loving the people around me, and trying to live life that way is actually more important than a lot of the work that I think is so important. But to get back to your earlier kind of question, I think that there was a lot of time where I was that barista and I was that waiter and I was digging ditches and I was driving talent around or literally doing anything I could to pay the bills. I slept in closets, I slept in hammocks, I slept in art cars. I mean, I did everything that I could to be able to get the opportunity to be creative and get paid for it. And most of the time, it didn't work out. Most of the time, people did not want to pay me to be creative. They wanted to pay me to dig holes or pull coffee or wait tables or teach snowboarding or whatever it was, but they didn't want to pay me to be creative. And so I had to keep hustling and keep figuring out a way to do that. And my first jobs, being a creative, I was paid, you know, $7 to $10 an hour to like book an entire tour. I was paid very little money to do the things that I wanted to do, and I knew there were opportunities that I had to just sacrifice for and go for it. And I think because I came from a blue collar family. My parents worked really hard for what they have, and I was really fortunate to have that work ethic built into me. But I also really didn't have a great love of money. Like I appreciate what money can bring in terms of equipment and opportunities and security, but I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in how I could cultivate something that was what I thought was longer lasting than that, and would give me the ability to earn money in the future, but do it in a way that didn't force me to do it by someone else's terms. And so, it was it was a tough road. I'm not gonna lie, and took a lot of years. But I remember when I had just turned, I think, 31, and I made, after 10 years in trying to scrap and fight for creative opportunities, and having been able to like win some pretty cool opportunities to tour the world, manage Grammy award winning artists, build wild multimedia events, do some things I was really proud of. I got my first opportunity to tell a real story, and it was, I got to tell the story of fair trade when it was first beginning, and they had not told their story and they'd not made any movies, and I got the opportunity to make one of the first movies about fair trade, and it was, that I remember working on this movie, like, working on the music, writing the script, working with the crew to get it filmed and organized, working with the graphic designers that I could. And this was all on a, tiny, tiny budget, just working around the clock to figure it out. I knew so little about the process, but I had all the right instincts and I knew a lot of the right people to make it work. I remember when it was done, I literally Googled what my job title was because I didn't know. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm a producer. I guess maybe I'm a director. I don't know. But it was that moment where I was like, this is what I want to do, or at least a big part of what I want to do, because it involves these written communication skills. It involves my great love of music. It involves interacting with people who inspire me, and it involves design, and it involves all these different expressions of art, but for a purpose. And the result of that movie was so impactful to me, to watch people recognize and realize for the first time, in just a couple of minutes, they were able to understand that if they paid $1 more, that people around the world would lead better lives. And that, that was for their coffee or their chocolate or their tea or whatever. But to humanize that story and transport people to, in this case, Guatemala, where they could see it in action, I was like, man, I am hooked on this. This is like how I want to be able to try to use these skills. And it was the first moment where I had actually felt like I didn't just use my skills to facilitate someone else's dreams. I got to use my own creativity to make a difference. And it was really a wonderful moment. And that was 16 years ago. And really been super thankful and super lucky, or fortunate, or whatever you want to call it, to be able to do it since then.
I mean, that's cool because, like, one thing about you, you were talking about all the jobs that people would be like, oh, I would never want to do those things. And I've done jobs I did not want to do to keep going, and worked for places I didn't want to be in because the thing I wanted to do wasn't paying what I was thinking I was worth. And a lot
Yeah.
of times we put a lot of worth on ourselves and we think we're worth way more. And then we won't take those opportunities because we're like, well, I should be paid this amount, not
Right.
this. And you humbled yourself. And like you said, you didn't have the love of the money, you had the love of the creativity. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of times I see people now, and like TikToks and all these, like, they're when they're doing these things, and I have kids and they do TikToks, and I'm always telling them, don't repeat what someone else did. Come up with something new, because they're just trying to get, the lightning in the bottle again. And it's like, no,
Right.
don't be that person. Be the innovator. And sometimes they listen, a lot of times they don't. But the the thing I just find it fascinating that, like you said, you kept persevering. And I think you're a role model to, like, a lot of people who are trying to get out there and be creative, tell stories. It's just to look at you and see where you started, where you went through. And like you said, it took you 10 years before you did that one project where you're like, this is what I want to do. But it took that long. And a lot of times we think, oh, it should happen right this second. And it never does. I mean, even the people you think it happened overnight, it didn't. They struggled for years. If you look at all their stories, none of them were like, oh, yesterday I was nothing, today I'm amazing. It was like, no, there was years of I was nothing, and people like didn't even pay attention. So with Soul Crafter,
Yeah.
now obviously the fair trade, that is probably, like, for you, one of your greatest memories,
Right.
because that was your first big one. But what is one since then that you were, again, like, that you did that you were a part of, and you're like looking at what you're doing and the people involved that maybe you were like, I can't believe I'm with these individuals, this, and I'm telling this story now. Is there one another one that kind of really sticks out that makes you like be this is just I just the continue that blessed that I'm doing these things
Yeah.
and they keep coming my way.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, I'm been really fortunate that a lot of really interesting projects have come my way and over the years, and so much of it's based on just relationship building and showing up and doing the work on time and within budget on projects that were small, but they led to something more. Um, but I mean, everything from I got the opportunity to work with on Bill Gates's retirement movie. I got to direct Al Gore, and I got to work on a bunch of things like that that were really exciting and far-reaching. I got to do a lot of work with the Gates Foundation and travel through Africa and so on. I got to do a giant project around the world for Heifer International on solutions to hunger and poverty in multiple nations, and that was really amazing project to be able to be a part of. I got to work with the Seattle Foundation and the Seattle Sounders. I'm a huge soccer fan, so it was just a huge blessing to be able to like work with these athletes that I really respect in a game that I really love. And we were able to raise $20 million over 5 years for nonprofits in the Seattle area through that project. And it was really a wonderful experience and really pushed me creatively to figure out how I could communicate to audiences that were in a stadium drinking beer. How do you get those people to really care about something? And we figured out a really powerful ways of doing that and built long lasting relationships. But even just recently, just this last in 2019, we worked on some really powerful storytelling with Native Alaskan groups, and we did stories on carbon sequestration of with Native Alaskan tribes and with language revitalization, and we helped them like with a 360-degree storytelling platform to help them communicate back to their own people what they were doing, and then be able to communicate beyond that. And that was everything through print design to movies that we shot on remote islands, taking little seaplanes to get to where there's no restaurant, there's no grocery store, and meeting people that lived literally off the land, and to really start to understand what Native Alaskans life is like and what they rely on, and what that really means, and what's been done to them over the course of many generations, and what came before them. And it really has humbled me and my crew to learn so much about these communities and these cultures that we really didn't know as much about beforehand. But to be able to participate in them telling the modern story of where they're at, you can't really see it, but that in the background there, that's a New York, the New Yorker magazine, and we contributed a bunch of material to help tell a story of farmed fish here in the Pacific Northwest, and support of Lummi tribes, and what was perpetrated against them with the when the fish pens broke, and just telling stories in support of things that people don't always know is happening, and be able to shed new light on that and bring it to them in a way that they can actually take in. It's one thing to like push something in somebody's face, but it's another thing to really recognize where is the audience coming from, and what do we want them to remember, and what do we want them to feel, and what do we want them to do at the end of this, and to reverse engineer our storytelling from those points. And then last year, this project was cut off by COVID, but we were hired by the United Arab Emirates to tell a series of stories on the role that art can play in mitigating extremist violence. And I was asked to be a part of a think tank of 39 people from 22 countries, and they represented people who were, imams and pastors and rabbis, people who were therapists, people who were sons of terrorists, people whose family had been killed by terrorism, former white nationalists, all these people coming together to try to create solutions, and recognizing the role that art can play in giving people an outlet, giving voice to the voiceless. It was an absolutely incredible project that we filmed through Europe, and had plans to film all through Africa and Asia, and then or Africa and the Middle East and Europe, but then COVID hit, so we finished the project much like this through a Zoom format, and that was a great experience and great opportunity. But there's been so many, and it's kind of hard to add them up.
Pick
And
one.
sometimes they're small, and it's a really powerful thing. And other times they're these big, giant, multi-year projects. And each one are, it is always a challenge and a welcome one to think about. People are trusting us with their story, and we need to figure out how what we create will help them with their communication journey, with their communication challenge, and help them move people towards the solution that they're hoping for. And so it's an honor and it's a pleasure. And I feel like I've gotten a master class over the last 16 years, getting to talk to experts in all these different categories, about global poverty, about microfinance, about, food culture all over the world, about, indigenous communities, climate change, all these different things. We've been able to participate in them deeply and learn so much. So that's a wonderful side benefit of this job.
It's your continuing education for the rest of your
Yeah,
life. And
yeah.
so, I mean, all of these sound like fascinating. Like you could do your own master class on, yourself. I could sit and listen to you for like I could do like 30 podcasts just with you, and because you're always fascinating. I love talking to you all the time, whenever I can. It's been years though, but I wish it was more a regular thing. But
Me too.
if people were to want to see some of your projects, where could they go to see like some of the films and the other projects you're doing that they could get more acquainted with what you guys do at All Stars? And where where
Yeah. So
where should they go to look that up?
Yeah, so a lot of times the work that we're doing is very specific to a campaign. And
Mhm.
so we've had scenarios where, like, we made a piece for Bill Gates where he used it for a group of like 6 people that were huge decision makers, that was the intended audience. And it sounds wasteful, but it was a really powerful way to communicate in a short period of time to a small group of people who could really leverage change. And this is like addressing systematic change and systems change. In another case right now, we're working with the Upper Skagit Indian tribe, and the Seattle City Council are sitting on a massive decision around the future of their livelihood. And so we've made a documentary. It took us a year to make this documentary that's only showing to the Seattle City Council. So we have a lot of projects like that, and we love those projects because we know who this intended audience is, and the end result a lot of times is major change, which to us is the whole purpose of why we do what we do. We're not here to get a like machine. That's not what we're after. But you can go to soulcraftallstars.com and you can see featured projects. And then from there, you can link to our social media channels where we'll typically push out things on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Vimeo, where you can see, everything from our animation projects to another big aspect of the work that we do beyond, like, conservation stuff in the Caribbean and Central America and Africa and throughout the Pacific Northwest, is we also love food. So we do a lot of food stories, and that's just something that we fell into. But it makes sense. I love working with farmers. My brother is a farmer. My wife's a farmer. My grandfather was a farmer. I love to eat. My whole family, we love to eat. It's a big part of what I think ties us into cultures. Like whenever we're traveling, a big part of the experience is the food we eat with the people that we meet and sharing those experiences. And so it's become a natural extension, is just all these great food stories. So that's another component of the work we do. But yeah, you can see a lot of our work through our website, soulcraftallstars.com. And then, we show things in film festivals. We have things on TV from time to time. But a lot of it's very targeted for a specific client to change people's minds or move people to action in a really creative way through storytelling. So it's a wide range of where our materials end up, and that I like that part of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's and to know when you see like you said, you're doing stuff for like the city councils, and then when you hear the vote and perhaps the vote goes in the way that your project was going, you know that you had a part in that. And so
Right.
that's gotta like, you may not be getting the millions and the accolades and the awards, but you know inside, and then
Yeah.
how it's affecting the rest of those around you, that you've done something. And that's better than, like you said, all the money anyway, because you are affecting a change for those around you.
Yeah.
um my question, I it, as a, if I could speak, the for someone coming up, a young person now, maybe graduating high school, and they hear what you're saying, and they want to do what you do. What is something you could tell? What would you like to have told yourself at that age to help keep them motivated? Because it, like, the world is discouraging. Like when you try things, I mean, you could be discouraged by your parents, by friends, family. They can be like, "That's stupid. Why are you doing that?" There's discouragement all around. Like especially with technology these days, discouragement comes like that, and it's like everywhere. And what would you say to someone to help encourage them to like keep going?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. And I'm not going to lie, I've been very discouraged in my own pathway. Along the way, there have been many times where, I just wondered, would I be able to get there to the point where I could do what I love and get paid for it? And even I'm also going to be really transparent. Even now that I run a company with people who work for me, and that we have this wonderful team of all stars who are super talented and creative and collaborate, it's a beautiful family. I still worry, all the
Mhm.
time about my ability to keep them all paid and make sure that we're moving forward in the way that we have to. I think that's natural as a business owner. So I don't want you to think, I don't want people to think that like it ends. I think you
Mhm.
just get better at managing it. I think you get better at figuring out how you wake up every day and do what's on your to-do list. That you wake up every day and you try. You wake up every day and you learn a new skill. You wake up every day and you build a new relationship, or you cultivate an old one. And that you do it for the right reasons. If you're only doing it to get somewhere, that's transparent. And people will feel that. You have to be your authentic self. You have to love people for real. You got to work hard and build skills. And you got to be ready for the knocks. I mean, there are gonna be knocks along the way. And the thing is, I mean, I think it's Charles Bukowski, one of my favorite poets. He says it's really how a man walks through the fire. It's really how a human being walks through the fire that really matters. So there's gonna be fire. There's gonna be tribulation. There's gonna be hardship. No question about it. And for me growing up, it was the boomers who were in front of us, and they had the door tightly closed. They were not hiring us long-haired hippie kids. They weren't hiring us creatives. They didn't understand our world, our lexicon. They didn't understand our values. And so they kept that door closed for a really long time. In fact, to the point where I was like, I'm going to eventually start my own company just to be able to do what I knew the world needed, but wasn't necessarily what the boomers thought the world needed. And nothing against boomers in particular. It's a generational thing. It'll happen with my generation too. But with young people, I just say, if you believe that you can do it, keep doing it. Keep fighting for it, and go find people who are doing what you want to do, and persistently ask to work for them, and work for whatever they'll pay you. Figure out how you can get that access, because those kinds of opportunities, getting to see someone else who's doing it firsthand, that's how you're going to learn the most that you could possibly learn. And that's how you build a community, and that's how you get into the world that you want to be in. One thing I would say is, like, all opportunities are good ones. So I did a ton of things that I didn't plan on doing forever, that just gave me a wider range of experience. And having taken this opportunity to go to Africa to work on a recording project just because I could, and I figured out how to get there on no money and how to not spend any money there. But I learned about I learned about what it was like to be in this case, Ethiopia. I learned about coffee culture deeply while I was there. I learned about the hybrid, of music that was happening there, and all of that helped inform my first opportunities with the Gates Foundation, my first opportunities with, fair trade, because it was a coffee stories. But just having those experiences were giant, and be able to point back to them. I don't know how many times, like, my passion for climbing mountains and snowboarding and, just the other parts of me as a human being, love of music, love of books, um, that all those things have played a part in my ability to get the opportunities, to build the relationships. So cultivate yourself, invest in yourself, invest in skills. I mean, I think one of my regrets is that I didn't pick up a camera earlier, that I didn't force myself to learn some of the editing tools earlier, you know, um, not to be intimidated. And it's easier to do that now. The harder thing is going to be able to compete against a world where everyone has those same tools. But the thing that I would say there is this is like people often ask me, they're like, oh, how are you going to survive when everybody's got a 4K camera in their pocket, with a recording device, and everyone's got editing software that practically edits for themselves, and I say, I'm not worried about it, because everyone's got a pencil, but not everyone writes a book. Everyone's got paint access to paints, but they don't paint paintings. Um, it's not it's not necessarily about the tools. It's about the skills that you retain in you. It's the stories that you have. It's the relationships that you have. So as a storyteller, I know the tools will change. The tools will get cheaper, but I can tell stories, through any medium now. And so that's what I rely on, is not that the tools aren't the end all. It's what I've cultivated in myself, but also, quite frankly, in my team of all stars.
Mhm.
I'm getting to a point now in my career where I just absolutely love giving that opportunity now to the people who are coming up, because there weren't many people who are giving me those opportunities. There were a few, and I really appreciate it so much. But I love now, as much as telling the story, I love like the young editor, the young shooter, the young storyteller, the young producer, and being able to give them a chance to do the next thing. And so now I'm surrounded by a bunch of young folks who are super, super skilled, hungry, and trying to do it right. And it's an awesome thing. And there are more people out there like me who want the young people who have skills, to come and work and make things happen. And if you can show up humble and work hard and, have integrity, then you'll have a long run of it. Those are the key things.
Definitely, definitely. I knew when I first got out of college, and one of my first jobs, and, I was doing kind of what I wanted to do, but not exactly. But uh, my mentor at the time sat me down and asked me what I learned in college, and I was spouting off, and I thought I knew everything. He goes, "Okay, take all of that you just told me, forget about it. I'm going to teach you how to do it the right way." And he goes, "This is how people are going to want it done when you sit with a producer, and this is what they want to see. They don't want to see what your professor taught you. They want to know." And he goes, "And you got to learn." His thing was, you have to learn each person you meet. You got to get to know them and find out how they want it. He goes,
Yep.
because no one's the same. No, you can't be like, well, this is how I do it. Well, for that person, that's how you do it. Now, for John over here, you got to do it a different way. You've got to change. And kind of like your stories, like you can't like take one project you've done and be like, okay, it worked here for the city council. Now I'm
Right.
going to go to Uganda and do it there. And it will flop because their mindset, like their culture is completely different. You can't tell the story the same way. You could probably tell the same story, but it has to be different and unique to that culture. And that's what you're doing. And that's great and I love that you're bringing the younger generations up and giving them the opportunity, because like you and even myself, we faced that where they did those above us didn't want to. They're like, "Oh, I don't want that kid in here,"
Yeah.
and they're a threat to me, and
Yep.
and we and I there are times where I have to fight that when I see a young kid wanting to help me out, and I'm like, I don't know if I want him helping me out. He's that punk, and it's like I've got to look past him. And like, wait, that's what happened to me. I can't do that.
Yep.
And I have one last question because I know you're busy. What is one story that's out there that you want to tell that you haven't told yet? Or can you do that without ruining a possible project you're working on? Like, is there a story out there that you really want to tell that you haven't yet? You
There's
maybe you
actually
don't need
quite
to
a
tell me which one it is, but
Yeah, there's actually quite a few. Like uh I have some projects and some stories that are part of my experience as a human being that I haven't had the opportunity to tell. And I think that some of it is there's been so many stories that I've gotten to tell that really were like dream jobs, and so many of those that were subject matter that was near and dear to my heart, or things that I really wanted to learn more about, and I've been really thankful for those. But then there's others that they just haven't come up with clients, and so they become things that I know I'm going to need to do as originals, and I'm excited about that. But that's really tough work when you are supporting a company that, we are a client-based company, and so to be able to make the time to do those things is really challenging. And we've started doing some of that along the way, and it's been really rewarding. But there's some really tricky stories that I would love to tell that I think their time is here. And I think that, the big thing is that I think that maybe, we're the right people to tell those stories. Um, and I hope we are. I think that it can be difficult right now. To be quite frank, as a white man of, a certain age, like, I don't know how much more people need to hear from someone like me. Like, we've spent a lot of time listening to white men tell us stories, and so a big part of what I've been about is like giving voice to people who haven't been able to tell their stories for a long time. And we did a lot of work. We did like 5 to 7 years of work with homeless communities, with foster youth, with all sorts of different communities. A lot more work now with native communities, a lot of work in Central America and Africa. We've been working in Haiti for 8 or 9 years now, doing some really interesting storytelling with some amazing folks there. So that's always been my priority. But I do feel like every human has stories that they should tell. And so that's a bit of my own personal struggle, is just knowing that there's these stories that I want to tell, but also recognizing that in this day and age, there may not be much space for me to tell those stories. But I'm not looking at it like I'm going to tell these stories because they're going to be blockbuster hits, or you know, award-winning documentaries. I feel like there's certain stories that I need to tell just because I need to tell them, and whether or not they resonate in this culture in this time period, that's okay. It's more just my duty as a storyteller, and as my duty to myself as a human being, that these are stories that I see and would like to share. So I'm really excited about them, and this is part of my struggle as a business owner and as a storyteller. Is, it used to be, how do I get paid to be creative? Now it's, how do I get enough space and time to do the original projects and keep everything else running? And I don't have an answer for it yet, but I'm chipping away at it.
Oh,
And
definitely is.
excited for that next thing, because that's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it when you get them out there. I'm really
Yeah.
excited to see where this goes next. And I thank you again. I know you're busy. You've got many things to do, and we're on opposite sides of the world right now. So I know for you, your day is still going, and mine's getting closer to an end. So I thank you again for coming on, Aaron. And I hope I can convince you to come back, because I really want you to tell the story of when you were a professional didgeridoo artist,
That's
because
absolutely.
that's the project we worked on.
That's right.
So
That's
I
right.
want to
I remember it was
I want to explore that sometime with you. You have some more time down the road.
I
And
would love to. I'd
yes,
love to. Yeah. Thanks so much. It's been great to get to see you again.
oh,
And
definitely.
big fan of you and everything that you work on. And yeah, let's do it again. That'd be fun.
Oh, yes, we will. And thank you. And for those of you watching, thank you for stopping by. Check out soulcraftallstars.com and check out their work on Facebook and Instagram and all over. And as always, stay safe and keep searching.